If confessed killer Luis Rivera is telling the truth, Dan Markel's own ex-wife, Wendy, may have financed the hit that took his life.
You said before something about you knew that the total amount equaled $100,000 or something.
Yeah, he gave me 37 in total. Then I asked him, how much you getting? He got like 40 something. I told him, we should just go rob her.
But in another surprising reveal, Rivera goes on to say in this taped confession with police that the murder almost didn't happen. He and the accused triggerman, Sigfredo Garcia, almost never even made it to their destination.
I'm in probation, man. If we get pulled over, I'm gonna go to jail. And we get pulled over.
Okay.
So the day we get pulled over, the officer grabbed my license, came back, gave me a ticket, like, slow down, put your seatbelt. Gave me a speeding ticket. And I'm on my lane. I looked at Garcia and told him, this take me to jail.
So you got a ticket in the Prius on the way up here.
Way up there.
Rivera says it was enough to make him want to abort.
But when we get pulled over, I tell him, yo, this is a sign, man. We should just turn around. He's like, nah, man, that we up here.
Somewhere in South Florida, a family sat down to dinner on the same night a man they knew was dying 500 miles away. They ate, they talked, they passed the money. The bills were damp. Someone had washed them, scrubbed them in water, as if you could rinse a man's life off a $100 bill. That man had a name. He had 2 little boys. That morning, he'd done the most ordinary thing a father can do. Buckled them into their car seats, drove them to daycare, watched them walk inside. He never saw the car trailing him. Through traffic, past the gym, down streets where nothing bad ever happens. 2 strangers had driven 500 miles and waited in a motel. Not for his money, not for anything he owned, just him. At 11 a.m., he pulled into his driveway, phone against his ear, and said the words that still haunt everyone who has heard them. Somebody's coming in behind me. His friend heard a sound. Then breathing, then nothing. He was 41. His sons were 3 and 5, 15 minutes away at daycare. The men who came for their father left his wallet in his pocket and his watch on his wrist. They took nothing, because they had already been paid. Here is what should terrify you. The people who ordered it never touched a weapon, never drove north, never raised their voices. They were educated, wealthy, respected, the kind of people who remember birthdays and host holiday dinners. And when detectives came asking questions, one of them mentioned, through tears, a joke. A family joke. About hiring a hitman. She swore he would never. Hold on to that sentence. You're going to watch it rot. For 2 years, while detectives chased a ghost, this family discussed the murder in plain sight. On phones they knew might be tapped, using a code word so domestic it's almost obscene. An object sitting in your living room right now. They said it laughing. 44 checks. 1 signature. Paid to a woman who never worked a day for that money. A payroll built to bury a killing. Signed feet from a waiting room full of patients reading magazines. That comfortable. That certain. That untouchable. Until one afternoon, a stranger crossed a Miami sidewalk, stopped in front of a silver-haired grandmother, and handed her a single sheet of paper. What was handwritten on it made her go very still. She walked away, pulled out her phone, and made the one call she should never have made. The FBI was counting on it. That call started a countdown the family couldn't hear, one that would tick for more than a decade, through 5 trials, a locked jury, and a restaurant recording so drowned in noise it took 6 years of technology to drag the truth out of it. It would end at an airport boarding gate, where that same grandmother stood clutching a one-way ticket to a country that never gives anyone back. She made it to the gate. She never made it past it. This is the story of Dan Markel, executed for refusing to hand over his children, by the family he married into. Dan Markel built his life like a case file, methodical, ambitious, airtight. Born in Toronto in 1972 to Ruth and Phil, raised alongside his sister Shelley, he set his sights on America early and collected its hardest credentials. Harvard twice, a master's from Cambridge, a federal clerkship under Judge Michael Daley Hawkins on the Ninth Circuit. By 2005, at 32, he held a professorship at Florida State University's College of Law, and within a few years, He was one of the most cited criminal law scholars of his generation, co-founder of Prof's Blog, a legal blog read in chambers across the country. A man who spent his career studying punishment, who never imagined he'd become the crime. In the middle of building it all, he matched with someone on J-Date. Wendy Adelson, 7 years younger, Cambridge-educated, sharp, and from money. Her parents, Harvey and Donna, ran a thriving dental practice near Fort Lauderdale. Her older brother Charlie worked there as a periodontist, pulling in a fortune from implant surgery. Dan and Wendy married in February 2006 at a lavish Boca Raton ceremony, announced in the New York Times. She joined the FSU law faculty. Benjamin arrived in 2009, Lincoln in 2010, 2 professors, 2 boys, a house on a quiet street in Tallahassee's safest neighborhood. But the family Dan married into had a center of gravity, and it wasn't in Tallahassee. It was 500 miles south, around Donna's dinner table, inside a family that did everything together, decided everything together, and did not absorb outsiders so much as tolerate them. And one member of that family had given himself a nickname. He'd printed it on the license plate of his Ferrari for the whole world to see. Maestro. The conductor. The man who arranges everything. Remember it. Wendy Adelson hated Tallahassee from the start. Small, remote, 7 hours from the world she grew up in. As the marriage strained, the distance stopped being geography and became the enemy itself. In September 2012, while Dan was away on a work trip, she moved. Movers emptied the house, furniture, the children's things, the contents of the safety deposit box. She drove the boys to her parents' home in Coral Springs and left divorce papers on the bed. Dan came home to bare rooms. He called it his Pearl Harbor. He fought back the only way he knew, through the courts, and the courts sided with him. When Wendy petitioned to relocate the boys to South Florida permanently, the judge denied it. She had not proven the move served her children's best interests. That ruling is the hinge of this entire story. It kept Benjamin and Lincoln in Tallahassee. It kept Wendy legally chained to a city she despised, and it meant that as long as Dan Markel lived and asserted his rights as a father, the Adelson family could not have what it wanted. They made that resentment plain. Court records show the relationship between Dan and the Adelsons curdled into open hostility. At one point, according to evidence later aired at trial, there was discussion of simply buying him out. Money in exchange for walking away from custody. Dan refused. His sons were not for sale. The family had now tried the courts, tried money. Both had failed. What remained was a category of solution that respectable families are not supposed to know how to find. By 2013, Dan was rebuilding, a new relationship. Friends noticed him laughing again and told him to leave the bitterness behind. The worst was over. They were wrong. Because 500 miles south, the problem of Dan Markel had already been handed to a man whose job was making problems disappear. A man Dan had never met. A man who, at that exact moment, was learning his name. One thing before we go there. This channel, True Crime Deadly, exists for exactly one kind of story. The cases where the danger never came from a stranger in the shadows. It came from across the dinner table. If those are the cases that stay with you, subscribe now. You'll want to be here for what this family does next. His name was Sigfredo Garcia, and almost no one who mattered in this story ever spoke to him directly. That was the design. Charlie Adelson had an on and off girlfriend, Katherine Magbanua. Katherine had 2 children with another man, Garcia, a South Florida figure with connections a periodontist could never find on his own. Garcia had a friend he called his brother, Luis Rivera, a Latin Kings leader from North Miami. Charlie to Katherine, Katherine to Garcia, Garcia to Rivera. 4 links. And at every one, the person above could deny knowing the person 2 steps below. By late 2013, prosecutors say that chain had its assignment. The money moved with the same discipline. Donna ran the books at the family practice, the Adelson Institute. Her signature would appear on 44 checks to Katherine Magbanua, month after month, into 2016. No job title, no schedule, No patient ever saw her work a day. A dental payroll, funding something that had nothing to do with teeth. In early June 2014, Garcia and Rivera rented a Toyota Prius in Miami and drove 7 hours north. They took motel rooms, learned Dan's streets and routines, then drove home without acting. Whatever stalled them changed nothing. 6 weeks later, they came back. Friday, July 18, 2014. Daycare drop-off just before 9. Then the gym, where a green Prius entered the lot behind Dan, caught on camera by a passing city bus. At 10:38, Dan drove home. The Prius followed, tracked by street cameras through Benton Hills. At 11, he turned into his driveway, told his friend on the phone a car was pulling in behind him, and was shot twice. He never regained consciousness. The next morning, Dan Markel was pronounced dead. His killers were already southbound, and the phones were already lighting up. 90 minutes after the shooting, Garcia's first call went to Katherine. Through the afternoon, Katherine to Charlie. Again and again. That night, Katherine arrived at Charlie's house for the payment. His parents, he mentioned, had just left. The cash he handed her was damp, because Donna had washed it. Clean money, for work that never would be. The plan had one flaw. It was bolted to the Prius's windshield, a small plastic tag the killers never once thought about, and it had been logging everywhere they went. The first detectives had a case with nothing in it. No theft, no enemies, no motive anywhere in Tallahassee. Just a neighbor's glimpse of a Prius, one of the most forgettable cars in America. But that Prius carried a SunPass, an electronic toll transponder. In 2014 Tallahassee, a city with barely a toll road, that was a South Florida habit, the investigative equivalent of a foreign accent. Detectives pulled toll records and traced the tag backward through Florida's highway system. It took nearly 2 years. In 2016, the trail dead-ended at a Miami rental lot, and a rental agreement with 2 names on it: Sigfredo Garcia, Luis Rivera. Corroboration stacked fast. A bank camera in Pembroke Pines, photographing Garcia in the rental on the day of the trip. A witness placing both men at a Tallahassee motel that June, and Rivera holding a revolver matching the murder weapon. Investigators now knew who was in the car. The phone records pointed up the chain. Garcia to Magbanua, Magbanua to Charlie Adelson. But calls prove contact, not conspiracy. Prosecutors needed the family discussing the murder in words a jury could hear. So in April 2016, the FBI made them panic. An undercover agent approached Donna Adelson on the sidewalk outside her Miami condo, posing as Luis Rivera's brother. He handed her a flyer, a news article about the murder, a phone number, and a figure handwritten across it: $5,000. His brother had helped her family with that problem up north, he said. Now he expected her to take care of him, the way she was taking care of Katie and Toto. Katie, Katherine Magbanua. Toto, Garcia's street name. Donna said she had no idea what he meant. Then she walked away, took out her phone, and called. Not the police, not a lawyer. Charlie. Agents call it a bump, a controlled jolt to a conspiracy, to watch where the tremors run. They ran on schedule. Donna to Charlie, Charlie to Katherine, Katherine hunting the stranger's identity. Every call on monitored lines, sketching the conspiracy's exact architecture in real time. The next day, Charlie met Katherine at a Miami restaurant called Dolce Vita. A federal recording device was rolling. It caught everything, and delivered nothing. The audio came back a wall of noise. Plates, music, crosstalk, burying the only 2 voices that mattered. The proof existed. No one could hear it. The technology that could would not exist for 6 more years. 6 years in which the family kept talking, using their private name for the murder. They called it the TV. The same TV from the joke Wendy told detectives on day 1, that her brother once quipped it was cheaper to buy her a television than hire a hitman. The joke was never a joke. It was the invoice. By summer 2016, Garcia and Rivera were in custody, and one of them was about to run the math on loyalty and decide the Adelsons weren't worth dying in prison for. Quick word: This case is still moving in 2026. Appeals are live in Florida's courts right now, and prosecutors have hinted it may not be over. True Crime Deadly tracks it as it breaks. Subscribe so the next development doesn't reach you 3 weeks late. Luis Rivera broke first. Already serving federal time for racketeering, he read his position instantly. October 2016. Guilty plea. Second-degree murder. 19 years concurrent. In exchange for everything. The rental, the motels, the aborted June run, and the motive, as it was explained to him, compressed into 8 words. The lady wanted her kids back. The entire conspiracy. The checks, the code words, the layers, reduced by a hitman to a single sentence. Garcia went to trial in September 2019, and the file buried him. Toll records, the rental agreement, the ATM photo, cell towers walking his phone along Dan's route. October 11th, 2019. Guilty of first-degree murder. Life, no parole. Katherine Magbanua's jury couldn't finish the job. 10 voted guilty, 2 held out. Judge James Hankinson declared a mistrial, and the middle link of the chain held for 3 more years, until her May 2022 retrial, where Rivera's testimony landed in full. Convicted on all counts. Life, plus 2 consecutive 30-year terms. Then she flipped. Charlie Adelson had been indicted a month before her retrial. At his October 2023 trial, prosecutor Georgia Kappelman put Katherine on the stand against the man she'd once protected. How Charlie stepped away to call his mother whenever the plan came up. How the night of the murder, the cash was still damp from Donna's washing. Then the tape. 6 years after Dolce Vita, FBI engineers had finally stripped the noise away, and the jury heard Charlie, the day after the bump, weighing his exposure in his own voice. If you're going to charge me, charge me. They didn't mention my name. These people only know part of the story. Charlie testified he was the real victim, extorted after the murder, ordered to pay $250,000 in 48 hours, or die. The jury threw it out. November 6, 2023. Guilty on all counts. Life, plus 60 years. 10 days later, at a Miami International boarding gate, a 73-year-old woman stood with her husband, both holding one-way tickets to Vietnam, a country that never extradites to the United States. Agents had been listening to Donna's jail calls with her son, settling her affairs, planning her exit, one way or another. She was arrested at the gate. Harvey walked out of the airport alone. Her trial ran 12 days in the summer of 2025 and produced the case's final self-inflicted wounds. A call recorded on a jail line she believed had disconnected. 2 fellow inmates testifying she'd privately admitted involvement and floated payment for silence. The woman who'd spent a decade saying nothing on the record had, in the end, said everything. September 4, 2025. 11 years and 47 days after the murder. The jury needed 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Donna, 75, broke down so completely, the judge cleared the jury from the room. At sentencing, Phil Markel gave her the Jewish blessing of living to 120 and sharpened it into a sentence. All 120 years, alone in her cell, thinking daily of the harm she caused. Then one question. Was it worth it? Ruth Markel needed one line. Donna blames outside forces for her family's curse, but she is the curse. Judge Stephen Everett. Life without parole plus 30 years. 5 people, 5 convictions. Every link in the chain, broken. But count the names in this story again. The chain was longer than the verdict list. Wendy Adelson has never been arrested, never been charged. Under oath, across multiple trials, she has denied any knowledge of the plot. That is the record, and it matters. So does the rest of it. Prosecutors have publicly named her an alleged co-conspirator. Her testimony came under immunity, and within days of Dan's death, she carried out the exact move the court had forbidden while he was alive. The boys, relocated to South Florida. She later changed their surname from Markel to Adelson. When investigators implicated her family, she severed all contact between the boys and Dan's parents. Which means Benjamin and Lincoln spent a decade being raised inside the family, convicted of ordering their father's murder. Then, there is Harvey Adelson, the patriarch, the man whose practice wrote 44 checks to Katherine Magbanua, the man standing beside Donna at the boarding gate, holding his own one-way ticket to Vietnam. He has never been charged. Whatever he knew, and when, has never been tested in a courtroom. After Donna's conviction, reporters asked prosecutors the only question left: is anyone else coming? Their answer was 2 words: stay tuned. For 6 years after the murder, Ruth and Phil Markel were denied every visit, every phone call, every photograph of their grandsons. Florida law gave them no standing, even with the boys living among the accused. So Ruth went to war with the law itself. She wrote a memoir, The Unveiling, on surviving a child's homicide. She lobbied the legislature session after session. In 2022, Florida's governor signed the Markel Act, granting grandparents the right to seek visitation when a parent is held responsible for the other parent's death. The Markels have since had limited, supervised visits. The boys are teenagers now. Dan's friends built justice for Dan, thousands strong, and marked the 10th anniversary of his death with a scholarship for law students carrying on his work. Dan himself was brought home. He's buried at Pardes Shalom Cemetery, north of Toronto, the city where a kid once dreamed his way to Harvard. And the case is still breathing. On July 1, 2026, a Florida appeals court upheld Charlie Adelson's conviction. Donna's appeal is pending right now. Prosecutors have never closed the file. A family believed money, distance, and 4 layers of strangers made them untouchable. No forensic breakthrough proved them wrong. No witness stepped from the shadows. They were undone by toll records, bank paper, and the sound of their own voices. If this story has a final chapter, True Crime Deadly will be there when it breaks. Subscribe now. Then answer one question below. Has everyone responsible for Dan Markel's death faced justice? Because half the people watching this don't think so.